All right, guys, and we are back talking about all things Sumerian. In the previous video, we talked a lot about their government structures with city states. We talked about their religion a little bit, and we'll talk more about that in class uh, next week. But we should continue to talk about their technology because they were pretty advanced for their time, and they're credited with creating a lot of the basic tools that almost every successful civilization used in order to survive and thrive. So um, let's start by talking about the individual inventions that the Sumerians are credited with. So they are said to have invented the wheel, the plow, the sail, and were the first to use bronze. Okay, so that's pretty big deal. Now, to us, the wheel that seems pretty standard, and maybe you've even thought about like the stereotypical caveman who invented the wheel. Like, why is that such a big deal? It's not really the wheel that's a big deal. It's the wheel with an axle that's a big deal because the wheel with an axle allows you to have a cart, and that allows you to carry more of your goods. Whether that's you're pulling it or better yet, if you can have an animal that pulls it, that allows for a lot easier transportation, that allows for more efficiency. And it's not something that people thought of all over the world. When we get to the Americas, the American civilizations did not have the wheel. China didn't have the wheel for a while. So these are technologies that need to be, that are pretty ingenious, but don't necessarily mean that everyone had it. Even Egypt didn't have the wheel for a long time. It really wasn't until they interacted with other civilizations, like the Mesopotamian civilizations, that they learned to adopt the wheel. So, um, while it seems like it's a basic, invention, it's fundamental to increasing the efficiency and technological output of all the other, members of the society. So the wheel is important. Obviously, the sail is important. Allows for longer distances over water. Plow allows for greater use of land to produce more food, and we know that more food equals more people. And bronze, right? Clearly, this is a metal. This is the first signs of metalworking that we have, at least on a consistent basis. Um, and bronze was significantly stronger than stone, so that puts them at an advantage over their Stone Age rivals. A couple other things we know. We know that they invented arithmetic and geometry. They had very basic math systems. They would make sure that they understood basic math is important for keeping things like taxes and records of those kinds of things. Geometry is important for building, right? So in order to have monumental buildings and just regular old buildings, they needed geometry. We also know they had astronomy. They had constant recording of the planets, and if you don't know, you can actually see up to Saturn without a telescope. So that's what they thought. They knew that those were planets, and you can tell, because they kind of move differently. In fact, the word planet comes from the Greek meaning wanderer, because if you look up at the night sky, and especially if you're somewhere without light pollution and it's a clear sky and you can just see thousands and thousands of stars, the planets seem to move in opposite directions than the rest of the stars do. As we're rotating, revolving or rotating, our planets move, spinning. The stars in the sky spin too, but the planets seem to kind of go counter that because they're also orbiting a star, and they're a lot closer. Um, so they knew what those were, or they at least knew that they were special. I don't know that they necessarily thought they were like Earth, but they knew that they were special, and they kept track of their movements as well. In fact, it's Mesopotamians, later Mesopotamians, who built off of the Sumerians, who gave us things like the zodiac. So if you know that you're an Aries or a Capricorn or something like that, that literally comes from the Babylonians, which we'll talk about later. Number system based on 60. So their number system was very different from ours. Ours is based 10, so everything is kind of based on, kind of standardized to 10. So like 1, 2, 3, and then you can have decimals and all that stuff. It's all base 10. They had base 60. So that means that if they drew like a like 1, that would be, either a 6 or a 60, depending on what um, what the symbol was. So that's pretty confusing. So then like a half would be 3 instead of, a half of 1. But they did that. That's just how they did it. It was what they kind of got used to doing, and then that's kind of what they did from then on. But we still use base 60 or base 6 in some types of numbers. So I'll let you think about it for a few seconds to see if you can think of one that uses things based off of 60. So maybe you're thinking of time, right? So I kind of give you a little hint there with I'll give you a minute, but a minute is 60 seconds, right? There are 60 seconds in a minute. Well, why are there 60? Why aren't there 100? Why aren't there 10? Right? This is something that we made up. It's a unit of measure that we've created. There's no definition saying that there needs to be 60 seconds in a minute or 60 minutes in an hour. That's just something that we've decided to do. Even 24 hours in a day, right? That's divisible by 6. So you're looking at, one of the most basic functions of our world, time, is still base 60, or at least base 6. You can think of again too with like a dozen, like a dozen of things, 2 dozen of things. That's all base off of 6, right? So we still have like special regard for number systems that are based off of 6 or 60. In this case, we got that right from the Sumerians. And the image that you're looking at right above my head is a tablet of cuneiform, which is the oldest written language in the world. As you can see, it kind of looks like golf tees. They're little triangular shapes that then kind of form neat rows that can be read. And cylinder seals we're going to look at on the next page. So we'll go more into cuneiform now. So you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, I'm actually going to move my image over. Hey, how about that? That's cool. You can see that there's tokens, and then there's an evolution there. So let's talk about this. So you might remember from chapter 1 that the earliest forms of writing were in pictographs, basically people just drawing what they were talking about or what they needed to represent. Cuneiform worked the same way. Initially, it was just people drawing something that symbolized something else. So initially, in Sumerian civilization, they had tokens. These tokens were essentially kind of like money that they would stand in for different items. And you can see what some of them are with the English word on the side. And what they would do is in Sumerian society, everything was kind of owned by the government. Everything was collective. So in order for you to get something, you had to be given, basically access to it. So you would be given, say, a number of tokens for oil. So that way, when you needed your, oil for cooking or whatever, you would then go to like basically the government and turn in your tokens, and they would give you the oil. I always think of it as like almost like Chuck E. Cheese or an arcade where you would turn in your tickets and get something in return, right? It kind of works the same way. You got to go to the one spot, turn it in. They give you, you have 4 tokens for sheep. They give you 4 sheep and you go on your way. But over time, that becomes very confusing, very troubling. They become easy to replicate. So they needed something that was a little bit more secure. So what they decided to do was create these things called cylinder seals. And that's the stuff that's right above me there. Cylinder seals were basically the world's first anti-theft device. So here's what you would do. You would be given a token. Let's say it's a token for, let's say, metal. Okay, so you have that kind of croissant-looking thing. Token. What you do is you take another ball of clay, right? So you have a soft ball of clay, and you put the token inside of it. Okay, like an envelope. It's actually what it was called, a clay envelope, because it would envelop the token. And then you would take your cylinder seal, which was only about this big. Some of them are really small, and you would roll it on top of the ball of clay, creating a continuous story. Right, as the cylinder rotates, the images repeat. You can see that on this image here, that these animals and stuff are the same over here, the mythological creatures. So the story will repeat. That repeating story basically says, hey, this clay's not been broken into. So whatever it says is still in there because this story has been maintained. Um, so it kind of was the world's first security check. Um, you also had this cool thing where people would create their own cylinder seals based off of stories that they liked or important gods to their families. So this kind of also became like a signature, so that you would recognize your story as it. If you can imagine that if you're in a house and there's all these kind of envelopes all over the place, knowing which ones are yours based off of the story that was there was very useful. So you had this continuous story showing that hey, the thing that's still in there is still in there, or the thing that I put in there is still in there because this hasn't been broken. Also, this is mine because this is my symbol or my seal, and you can think that spreads all the way up into like our modern signatures, that you sign for things, making your mark on the page. Is very similar to putting your cylinder seal over the top of the ball of clay. So if you guys have questions about how this works, we can talk more in class when I see you guys next, because we're going to do some things with cuneiform. But that's how it worked. That's how it originally worked. But you can imagine that this is also really time consuming, right? There's a lot of factors that go into this, and it became just much more convenient to draw the tokens themselves instead of actually having the physical tokens. So that's where you get these pictographs. So these tokens were created initially to represent certain things, and then the pictographs were used to then depict the token of the thing. And then over time, as cuneiform evolves, the symbols also keep changing, so that it then kind of still ish sometimes looks like the token, but in other times completely not, right? So you can see that in the Neo-Sumerian or Old Babylonian images, right, the symbols do look kind of similar to, at least in some of them, to the token itself. But as it goes, right, Neo-Babylonian or Neo-Assyrian, those look very, very different. And a lot of that is just because evolution. And we'll talk about how cuneiform changed shape over time. So that's really it. We'll talk more about cuneiform in class. We'll go over this other image that shows the evolution of cuneiform and go over these questions. But we will do that in class, as I have you guys actually write some cuneiform. And the little golf tees there, as I like to call them, are the symbols that make up this ancient language. So we will talk more about this then. And until then, guys, I will see you later.